At 5 a.m. in New York, February 23, 2026, the sky is layered, quiet, and more introspective than it first appears. The Sun is at 4 degrees Pisces, sitting close to Saturn at 1 degree Pisces, with the North Node also in Pisces. Mercury is moving through Pisces as well. The Moon is at 20 degrees Taurus, slowly approaching Uranus at 27 degrees Taurus. Venus stands in Aries. Mars and Jupiter are in Cancer. Neptune has just entered Aries at 0 degrees, and Pluto is holding steady in early Aquarius. Even though today's title references Mars in Aquarius and slowing down impulsive decisions, Mars is not the loudest presence in the sky right now. Pluto may be in Aquarius, but Mars itself is in Cancer, filtered through emotion and protection rather than raw rebellion. The dominant tone comes from Pisces and Taurus, water and earth, sensitivity and embodiment, reflection and grounding. This is not explosive energy, it's not a breakthrough moment. It's a reckoning with what's already been building. When the Sun sits next to Saturn in Pisces, there is a quiet seriousness in the atmosphere. Not heavy in a dramatic way, but steady. You may wake up with a subtle awareness that something inside you needs attention, a conversation you've been postponing, a feeling you've been numbing, a boundary you know you've blurred. Pisces dissolves, Saturn defines. Together they create an inner shift that feels like maturity rising to the surface. You might notice that you're less interested in reacting and more aware of consequences, less eager to escape discomfort and more willing to sit with it. There is also a sense that your emotional life cannot be outsourced today. You can't just distract yourself and hope it passes. You can't scroll your way out of it. The sky is asking for presence. At the same time, the Taurus moon adds a grounding undercurrent. It slows the emotional waters of Pisces and asks you to anchor into something tangible: your body, your breath, your physical environment. It softens the edges of sensitivity with stability. So the inner shift of today is subtle but meaningful. It is the movement from impulsive reaction toward embodied awareness, from speed toward steadiness, from "I need to fix this now" toward "let me understand what's actually happening." And that shift sets the tone for everything that follows. Sun conjunct Saturn in Pisces doesn't usually shout. It settles into the body first. You might feel it as a slight heaviness behind the eyes when you wake up, or a reluctance to jump straight into your phone the way you normally do. There can be a quiet awareness in the chest, almost like a gentle pressure, not painful, just present, as if your system is asking you to slow down before the day fully begins. Pisces is porous, it absorbs, and with Mercury also in Pisces, thoughts can feel less linear and more emotional. You may notice that your mind drifts back to unfinished conversations, or that a memory from years ago surfaces unexpectedly, not because something is wrong, but because your internal boundaries are softer today. Saturn nearby makes those sensations harder to ignore. You might become more aware of where you are tired, not physically exhausted necessarily, but emotionally stretched. There can be tightness in the shoulders from carrying responsibility, a subtle clenching in the jaw from holding back what you really want to say. This is where body awareness becomes crucial. The moon in Taurus invites you to check in with something very simple. What feels steady right now? Not what looks successful, not what sounds right in theory, but what feels steady in your nervous system. Maybe you crave something grounding, a slower morning routine, a warm shower, a real breakfast instead of coffee on the go. Taurus energy speaks through texture and sensation, the weight of your feet on the floor, the temperature of the air on your skin, the feeling of your back against a chair. And as the moon moves closer to Uranus in Taurus, you may notice a slight restlessness under that calm, a twitch of impatience, a sudden idea about changing your schedule or rearranging your space. Uranus brings small jolts to the system. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be as subtle as realizing that your current rhythm no longer fits. The body often knows this before the mind does. You might feel it as a small surge of adrenaline when you think about a particular decision, or a tightening in the stomach when you consider staying the same. That sensation is not necessarily a sign to act immediately. It is a signal to pause and observe. Today, the body is the first messenger, before logic, before planning, before reacting. If you listen closely, you may notice that the impulse to act quickly often comes from discomfort in the body, a desire to relieve tension, to escape uncertainty, to resolve the feeling as fast as possible. But under this sky, awareness itself is the work. Instead of rushing to fix, you're invited to feel, to notice the breath in your abdomen, to unclench your jaw, to soften your shoulders, to ask yourself quietly, what is my body trying to tell me before I make a move? That subtle shift from reacting to sensing is where the real change begins. As the morning moves into late morning and early afternoon, this internal shift starts to touch daily life in very practical ways. The moon in Taurus wants rhythm. It wants consistency. It wants to know what's coming next. So you might feel more aware of your schedule than usual. Meetings, deadlines, errands, the steady hum of responsibility. Taurus energy prefers predictability, but as it approaches Uranus, there's a quiet friction between comfort and change. This is where it shows up at work. You could be sitting in front of your laptop, reading an email that normally wouldn't bother you, but today, something about it lands differently. Maybe it's the tone, maybe it's the expectation behind it. You notice a small contraction in your chest, a thought like, why am I still doing it this way? It's not dramatic. You're not about to quit your job, but you are more aware of what feels sustainable and what feels draining. With Sun and Saturn in Pisces, emotional responsibility extends into professional life. You might realize that you've been carrying more than your role requires, taking on emotional labor in group projects, absorbing tension in team dynamics, saying yes to avoid discomfort. Today makes that visible. At the same time, Mercury in Pisces can make communication softer but less direct. You may struggle to articulate exactly what feels off. You might draft a message and delete it, rewrite it, sit with it. That's not inefficiency, that's discernment forming. Midday, you might crave something grounding before making a decision, a walk around the block, a proper lunch instead of eating at your desk. Taurus energy reminds you that clarity often comes after you stabilize your body, not before. Then there's Mars and Jupiter in Cancer, adding emotional charge to everyday interactions. A small comment from a partner or co-worker might feel bigger than it is. Not because you're overreacting, but because themes of safety and belonging are closer to the surface. You might catch yourself wanting to respond quickly, to defend, to explain, to fix. That's the impulsive edge the title speaks to, the urge to act just to relieve the tension. But under this sky, there is a gap between feeling and action, and that gap is everything. You may notice that when you pause, just a few seconds longer than usual, the intensity shifts, the body settles, the story in your head softens, and the response you choose feels different. This is also a day where small financial or lifestyle decisions can come into focus. The moon approaching Uranus in Taurus can bring sudden insight about spending, saving, or the way you structure your time. You might look at your calendar and think, this doesn't reflect my priorities anymore. Or review your budget and see patterns you've been ignoring. Again, the impulse might be to overhaul everything immediately. Delete the subscription, cancel the plan, restructure the entire week. But Sun conjunct Saturn asks for something steadier. Not a dramatic pivot, a measured adjustment. In daily life, that could mean having one honest conversation instead of rewriting the whole dynamic. Adjusting one habit instead of redesigning your identity. Taking one afternoon off instead of blowing up your schedule. The opportunity today isn't about grand moves. It's about recognizing where you've been operating on autopilot and choosing, consciously, one small shift that feels aligned. And in that subtle shift, something recalibrates. Not loudly, not instantly, but meaningfully. The core pattern of today is subtle but powerful. Emotional overextension followed by the need for grounding. You may start the day feeling like you've been carrying something for a while. Not just tasks, not just obligations, but emotional weight, expectations, unspoken tensions. The sense that you've been holding space for others without fully checking in with yourself. Sun conjunct Saturn in Pisces makes that visible. It doesn't accuse you. It doesn't dramatize. It simply reveals where your compassion has turned into quiet self-neglect, where your flexibility has blurred into a lack of boundaries, where your willingness to understand everyone else has left you disconnected from your own needs. Then the Taurus moon steps in and asks for something very practical. Stabilize. Not escape, not explode. Stabilize. But here's where the tension arises. As the moon moves toward Uranus, you may suddenly see clearly what isn't working. And clarity can create urgency. Once you see the leak, you want to plug it immediately. Once you see the imbalance, you want to correct it now. That's where impulsive decisions can sneak in. You notice the pattern and think, I need to fix this right away. Send the long message, redesign the schedule, confront the issue, make the dramatic change. Yet with this sky, speed is not the medicine. The pattern is not something is wrong. It's something is out of alignment. And that's a very different conversation. Recalibration is quieter. It might look like adjusting how much emotional labor you offer in one conversation, choosing not to respond instantly to a text that triggers you, deciding to log off earlier instead of announcing a new life plan. Mars in Cancer and Jupiter in Cancer intensify the protective instinct. You may feel like you have to defend your emotional territory quickly, but defense doesn't always require immediate action. Sometimes it requires containment. Slowing down long enough to separate reaction from intention. The real theme of today is discernment. Are you making a move because it is aligned, or because you want to relieve discomfort as fast as possible? That question alone can change the trajectory of the day. This is not about suppressing impulse, it's about understanding it. You are allowed to want change. You are allowed to see what no longer fits. But under this sky, the most powerful shift may be choosing steadiness over speed. Emotional overextension calls for grounding, not revolution. And grounding begins with one conscious pause. If we look a little deeper at the astrology itself, the reason this pattern is surfacing becomes clearer. The Sun at 4 degrees Pisces, sitting so close to Saturn at 1 degree Pisces, is not casual. When Saturn is involved, life feels more real. Pisces alone can drift. It can forgive too quickly, blur lines, absorb what isn't yours. But Saturn brings edges. It asks you to define what is yours to carry and what is not. With the North Node also in Pisces, this isn't just a passing mood. There is a longer arc here about learning emotional discernment. learning how to stay compassionate without dissolving into everyone else's needs. Mercury in Pisces adds another layer. Your thinking is filtered through feeling, logic is softer, intuition is louder. But without Saturn, intuition can be chaotic. Saturn nearby stabilizes it. It asks you to test what you're sensing against reality. Then we have the Moon in Taurus approaching Uranus in Taurus. Taurus wants continuity. Uranus disrupts. When these two meet, stability gets questioned. Not destroyed, questioned. That's why the urge to change something may feel sudden today. A flash of clarity about money, about routine, about what truly feels secure. Uranus doesn't always bring external events. Sometimes it brings internal awakenings that feel electric for a moment and then settle. Mars and Jupiter in Cancer deepen the emotional context. Cancer is protective, sensitive to threat, and oriented toward safety. When Mars moves through Cancer, action is rarely neutral. It is driven by feeling, by loyalty, by memory. Jupiter there expands that emotional field. It can amplify both care and reactivity. So when something touches your sense of belonging, your instinct may be to move fast, to defend, to protect. That is why the title theme of slowing down impulsive decisions is relevant, even though Mars is not in Aquarius right now. The Aquarian influence comes through Pluto in Aquarius, which is slowly reshaping identity and collective belonging. There is an undercurrent of wanting freedom, authenticity, and a break from old roles. But Pluto works slowly. It transforms through awareness, not explosions. And then there is Neptune at 0 degrees Aries. A new cycle of inspiration just beginning. Aries wants to act. Neptune wants meaning. Together they create a spark of vision, a sense that something new is possible. When you combine all of this, Pisces sensitivity, Taurus grounding, Cancer protectiveness, Aries impulse, Aquarius transformation, you get a complex emotional landscape. The impulse to act quickly makes sense under these influences, but so does the need to slow down. This isn't contradictory energy, it's layered. The discomfort is real, the urge to shift is real, but the skill being strengthened right now is restraint. There's an older narrative many of us carry, especially if we've spent years consuming intense spiritual or motivational content. The narrative says that when discomfort rises, it means something big is about to happen. That restlessness equals destiny, that urgency equals alignment. But today's sky reframes that. With Sun and Saturn in Pisces, maturity doesn't look like dramatic action. It looks like restraint. It looks like noticing your emotions without immediately building a story around them. It looks like choosing not to make a life-altering decision from a single wave of feeling. You might be used to interpreting restlessness as a sign to leap, to overhaul, to break free. Pluto in Aquarius does whisper about authenticity and transformation. Neptune in Aries sparks a new desire to begin. But neither of these are asking for a reckless move. The old lens says, if I feel this strongly, I must act now. Today's lens says, if I feel this strongly, I should understand it first. That shift is subtle but powerful. You are not behind. You are not missing your moment. And you are not weak because you chose not to blow your life up today. Under this sky, strength shows up differently. It shows up as emotional containment, as the ability to sit with complexity without rushing to simplify it. For those who once resonated with the idea of being set apart, called to something bigger, there is still depth here. But it is grounded depth, not dramatic destiny. The real growth today is internal. It is the discipline of not letting every surge of feeling dictate your direction, Slowing down impulsive decisions is not a lack of courage. It is discernment in action, and discernment is quieter than hype. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need urgency. It simply asks you to trust that clarity becomes stronger when it is given space to breathe. Integration today is not about doing more. It is about doing less, but with more awareness. Under Sun and Saturn in Pisces, the first step is acknowledging what you are actually feeling before you translate it into action. That might mean giving yourself 5 quiet minutes before responding to a message that triggers you. It might mean admitting, even privately, that you are more tired than you thought. The Taurus moon supports small, embodied adjustments. Instead of rewriting your entire week, you could shift one thing. Eat lunch away from your desk. Step outside without headphones. Tidy one corner of your space. Let your body feel a sense of completion somewhere tangible. When the urge to make a fast decision rises, especially around emotional topics, try extending the pause by a single breath. Mars and Jupiter in Cancer can make protection feel urgent. But protection does not always require immediate movement. Sometimes it requires clarity. You might ask yourself, if I waited 24 hours, would this still feel true? If I slowed this down, would my answer change? With Venus and Chiron in Aries, integration also includes honest but simple self-expression. Not dramatic declarations, just clear sentences. I need time. I'm not sure yet. That doesn't feel right for me. Let those words land without over-explaining. Neptune, newly in Aries, suggests that new desires are forming, but they don't need to be announced today. You can let them exist quietly. You can experiment privately before committing publicly. And Pluto in Aquarius reminds you that identity shifts don't require performance. You don't have to prove you're evolving. You can just begin adjusting your behavior in small ways that align more closely with who you are becoming. Integration today is gentle. It is slowing your reaction by a few seconds, softening your shoulders before you speak, letting one decision rest overnight, choosing steadiness over spectacle. That is enough for this sky. As the day winds down, Pisces energy tends to deepen. You may notice that by evening, the external noise fades and your inner world becomes louder. Not in an overwhelming way, just more noticeable. Thoughts may slow. Emotions may feel closer to the surface. The Sun and Saturn in Pisces continue to hold that quiet, reflective tone, asking you to take your inner life seriously without dramatizing it. The moon in Taurus, still moving toward Uranus, might bring one last flicker of insight before the night settles, a realization about a habit, a soft acknowledgement of what needs adjusting. It doesn't require a decision tonight. It simply wants to be seen. You don't need to solve everything before you go to sleep. Mars and Jupiter in Cancer may still stir protective instincts, especially in conversations with people close to you. If something feels tender, let it be tender. You don't have to harden around it. You don't have to win the moment. Instead, let the day close in a grounded way. Maybe that means putting your phone down earlier. Maybe it means sitting in silence for a few minutes, noticing your breath move in and out of your body. Maybe it means placing a hand on your chest and recognizing that you made at least one decision today from steadiness instead of urgency. That matters. Slowing down impulsive decisions is not about becoming passive. It's about becoming deliberate. It's about understanding that not every wave of emotion requires immediate motion. The sky today isn't pushing you forward. It isn't pulling you back. It's testing whether you can tell the difference between reaction and choice. If this reflection resonated with you, take it into tomorrow quietly. No grand declarations, just awareness. And we'll meet the next sky together, one layer at a time.